Yarn shopping versus yarn browsing. What's the difference? Is it bad? Does it trigger overspending? If these are questions you've been mulling around, I'd love it if you would stick around and talk some yarn with me today. I think so many of us are guilty of spending a lot of time browsing for yarn or shopping for yarn or a combination of the two. You'll notice I said guilty in air quotes because I don't really think that's anything we should feel guilty about. But I do have a few kind of qualifying questions for us to dig into today. Really cover what is the difference between yarn browsing and yarn shopping, and what does that mean for us? So what is the difference between browsing and shopping? Browsing is going to be spending some time, probably online, but sometimes in a store, looking at what's available, checking on the prices, comparing different yarns to another. It could be going to different stores to try to find comparable prices or availability of colors. If you're physically going in the store to check the softness or to really be able to see in person, like the size of the skein, things like that. Where if you're going shopping for yarn, you are definitely going with the intent to make a transaction and walk out of that store or have yarn delivered to you. And I think that browsing gets a little bit of a bad rap. I'm going to be honest, I love browsing for yarn. I browse for yarn maybe not every day, but probably at least every other day. I don't have a problem with this. At this point, I feel pretty comfortable in the size of my yarn stash, so I know that I have yarn here to work with. I'm not feeling left out or anything. I'm not feeling like I don't have yarn to work with. So there isn't that pressure. I have taken some time and ignored sale emails. I'm not necessarily feeling like that rush, like, oh my gosh, there's a sale. I'm never going to get yarn at this good of a price again. I've kind of worked through some of all of that, so I know that there isn't a rush and there will be more sales. I'm not feeling in danger that my browsing is going to turn into shopping. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with yarn shopping either. In fact, I'm going to be doing some yarn shopping shortly, but we'll get to that later. Yarn browsing or browsing for yarn can be super helpful, especially if you are newer to yarn and you're not familiar with prices and you're not familiar with what's out there. Yarn browsing can be such a great tool because number one, it helps us save money in the long run because we aren't fooled by sales that are out there, and we can get a good bead on what is a good price, what's a good sale price, what's a stocking up price by browsing. If you are not looking at yarn, you're ready to do a project and you walk into a store, you might think you're getting a great deal, and in fact, you're not at all. I do think yarn browsing has some definite benefits. Not only that, but you're also able to see what types of yarn certain retailers specialize in and get familiar with where you can go for different types of yarn. I've recently gotten acquainted with the Wool Warehouse, which is definitely not local to me. Like, I've really noticed while I'm browsing on there, there's more access to some different types of yarn that I'm not really able to find here, like at my local Joann's. And I've really been enjoying exploring some of the different wool blends and cotton blends, seeing like the different colors and textures and really what is available, because this company is based out of the UK and it does seem like their demographic of shoppers is a little bit different than what's here in the United States and in the Midwest United States. I'm loving seeing what's available there compared to what I'm used to seeing. I've got a video and I will link it where I have gotten some drops yarn from the Wool Warehouse. I'm really enjoying seeing what I can do with these projects with this different yarn. And, I have found that I can get drops there for very reasonable prices. The shipping is reasonable. I'm not breaking the bank to be able to try some different projects that are going to offer me a different discount than what I would find maybe just like if I'm checking out some of my basic retailers available to me like Dollar Tree or Walmart. And there's nothing wrong with those. I definitely check out the yarn when I'm there. Like I said, it's just access to different things. And I've come to realize if I didn't express this good enough, by checking out these different retailers that maybe have different demographics or specialize in a little bit different types of yarns, you can see the price differences. If they're selling tons and tons of a mercerized cotton, like if more of their customers are buying that and they're going through it, there's going to be more color options. There's going to be a better pricing, where if that's something that your local Joann's, doesn't really have a need for, they're going to be much more limited and the price is going to be higher. So by browsing and seeing which places have more of different types of yarn, you're definitely able to know for the future when you want to shop, where am I going to get the best options at the best prices? I've never ordered from Hobby or Hobby. I'm not really sure how to pronounce that, but I've browsed there a bunch of times and I have seen so many other people getting like the beautiful cotton cakes of yarn. They're just gorgeous. So I know from looking, like if that's something I want to do, if I want to do like an absolutely beautiful gradient cotton shawl, that's where I'm going to want to go to get that type of yarn. A less economical reason and more of a personal reason that I do so much yarn browsing is, for me, it's like a coping mechanism. It's just a way I disassociate a little bit. And I think a lot of us have things that we do to disassociate when maybe life gets a little too stressful or we're just feeling a little too much feelings. Maybe you go on Instagram and look at reels. Maybe it is crochet that you use to help disassociate. There's tons of different activities, but it's just something that kind of removes you from the situation and gives you a little bit more time to reflect on yourself and get away from like all of the stimuli of the world, because it can get to be a little too much sometimes. For me, spending a little bit of time browsing some different sites is a good way for me to disassociate, get away from the stress, to spend 15 or 20 minutes just quietly to myself. But at the same time, I'm also still kind of learning, which for me is important. I find a lot of pleasure in knowing what yarns are out there and knowing what those types of yarn can do and what projects they're good for and what they should cost. For me, that's a fun, positive experience. It's not going to be for everybody. It's definitely not. But for me, it is a great way for me to disassociate while still being like mildly productive, because some of that information is useful here and I can pass that on. Is yarn browsing inherently bad? It is definitely not. But if you are feeling like you're missing out, if it gives you the ick, if you are feeling feelings of jealousy or anger, things like that, then yeah, it could be bad for you. And it's not inherently bad, but the result of it and feeling icky, if it causes you to feel that way, then it's probably not a good idea for you to be browsing for yarn, whether it's online or in the store. And in that case, if it is something that bothers you, then I think it's something where you might want to consider, sacrificing, knowing the best prices and all that for like working maybe more project to project and just buying a type of yarn that you need for a specific project, maybe based on, what the pattern calls for or something like that, to avoid those icky feelings, no matter what they're being triggered from. So as long as you aren't feeling worse when you're done browsing, if you're feeling neutral, then I would say no, browsing for yarn is not bad. And for me, I know, like, I took Facebook off of my phone. I have to like literally log into a desktop to check Facebook, because for me, I got that icky feeling and that not feeling good feeling from randomly scrolling Facebook to disassociate at night. And I don't know why, I just felt icky every time I was on there just flipping and scrolling through. And it's not like there was any specific thing, but for me, that just gave me that ick feeling. And yarn browsing is so much more of a neutral activity for me. And having experienced and like noticed and recognizing how I felt after the Facebook as opposed to that has really guided me into changing the way I disassociate a little bit. And this seems to be healthier for me. It might not be for everyone. Another way you might tell if browsing for yarn might be bad for you psychologically is if you're going in person to the store, and if you feel like you cannot walk out empty-handed, then I would discourage you from doing yarn browsing and only going into the yarn store with a plan on what you're going to buy. You know, there's a lot of reasons why we might feel like we can't walk out empty-handed, and I mean, I feel like there's so many that I wouldn't even know where to begin listing all of them, whether it's missing out or just, I don't know, like feeling guilty for being in there without buying anything. I don't know. But if that is something that poses a problem or makes you feel bad walking out of that store without buying anything, then definitely don't browse. Again, go in with a plan, know what you want, maybe only compare a couple yarns if you're kind of torn, and just get what you need for the project. And I think the biggest argument you're probably going to hear against browsing for yarn is that it triggers overspending. And, you know, for starters, let's just put it out there. Everyone's budget is different. So what's overspending for one person is totally different from another. The expenses we all have are different. The stage in life we are all in is different. So I definitely don't want to imply any type of like guidelines for any specific person, but deep down inside, I think we all have a pretty good idea of what overspending means to us. I am a thrifty girl. I love saving as much money as possible. I don't like just like mass consumerism. I like to purchase with a purpose. I'm definitely against overspending. I want you to love your yarn. I want you to love shopping for your yarn. I don't want it to be a painful experience. I don't want you to feel guilty about what you buy. So of course I do want you to purchase with a purpose as well. So if you're going into it knowing eventually I am going to want to purchase some yarn, what can I learn about it now? You're kind of pumping the brakes on the idea of overspending. And I think this is why shopping online can really, really help us out. And even if it means we're shopping at a local store like Joann, because I do use their app and I think their app is pretty user friendly. So even though there's a Joann that's local to me, I like to look on the app, check out the different prices, see, because on that app, you can even see if they have that particular yarn in stock in your store, which is super helpful because if you want to go check it out in person, you can, you don't have to drive all the way there and get there and then be like, oh man, they don't have it. Like, you know, if it's there. So browsing can be such a great tool and it can save you so much time by narrowing down a lot of your different choices that are out there so that maybe you can just pop over to the store and, you know, if you're kind of tied between a couple different colors or maybe a couple different yarns, you know, maybe you're thinking like, should I go Super Saver? Should I go Big Twist Value? Or maybe should I bump it up and go with a Karen Simply Soft? You know, if they're all like similar colors, you can go there to the store. You already know the specs. You already kind of know what the pluses and minuses are, but you can grab those 3 yarns, hold them together, feel them, and just check out and see what you really love the most. And in that case, you're actually saving money as opposed to overspending because you've done your homework and you're not like just randomly ordering stuff and hoping that it works out. You've already done that bulk of the research. I kind of ran into a bit of luck, I guess you'd say, and I'm in possession of a couple gift cards, and I've got one to Joann, one to Hobby Lobby, and one to Wool Warehouse. Of course, my first instinct with the Wool Warehouse was like, get online, and I started punching things in and looking it all up, and I had already had some stuff hanging out in a cart, and I did really have to like pump my brakes and be like, okay, just because we have this free money doesn't mean we should just instantly spend it. So I need to spend a little bit of time browsing. I had seen this in another video. It was really about, it was The gal doing the video was talking about recovering from overspending and how much she was changing the way she shopped for things and what she was allowing herself to do. So in this particular video, she said she did spend a lot of time browsing during the week, and for her, she said it was a procrastination issue. So instead of doing like some paperwork she didn't want to do, she would browse for, a new pair of jeans or something like that, which I think can be very applicable to us as crocheters or knitters or any craft really. So she set some parameters for herself. If she was going to be browsing, she wasn't going to make a purchase till later on. So like a way you could do this is if you want to do some browsing, maybe set up half hour or hour or whatever on any weekday evening. You can do your browsing. Maybe it is after dinner, maybe, it's whenever fits in your schedule, on your commute, whatever. But go ahead and put them in the cart, but don't purchase. Set the parameter for yourself that you can browse during the week, but you're not actually going to make a purchase till the weekend. Or maybe it's a specific date. Maybe your paycheck comes twice a month or once a month, and you say, okay, I can browse on these particular days, but I'm not going to purchase until these days. And then that way, it really gives you time to look at your cart, see what's in there, see if you still like it after that initial moment is over. I think sometimes while we're browsing, we get that rush of dopamine and it feels good to our brains to add it to the cart. But if we come back 5 days later and look at that item, maybe a little more objectively, does it still give us that hit of dopamine, or are we a lot more neutral about it? Are we like, I guess I could get this anytime? And that is what I'm doing with these gift cards that I have. I will be saving the Hobby Lobby card I have because they do, or have in the past, always had an annual clearance sale in the summertime where they get rid of a lot of different yarns. So it's like stuff that colorways they're not going to have anymore, or just specific yarns they're not going to have anymore. So I am saving that gift card specifically for that sale, if I can make it to it. So that one's kind of off the table already because I already know the time frame that one will be used. But as far as Joann and Wool Warehouse, it feels like fair game. So I am setting the parameters for myself that, I'm going to browse, I'm going to look through stuff during the week. I'm going to add all the fun things that bring me joy and look pretty and seem like they'll feel good. I'm going to add all those things to my cart, and then I'm going to go back and edit that cart a few days later and see what all I still like, but I'm still not going to hit purchase. And then I'm going to wait for the weekend to go in and look at it one final time and see, again, is there anything I can edit out of this? And if so, then hit the purchase button. And I feel like that is a much more, I don't want to say educated, informed. It's a much more informed way for me to make the decision on what are the best yarns for me to buy at that time. On the plus side too, a lot of times sales at yarn stores are on the weekend. So that can be something too, where if you're kind of going to be wanting some things, usually like Joann's usually has their doorbusters on the weekend. An extra plus for just purchasing on the weekend. I know in a recent video where I was talking about some yarn mistakes, I had mentioned that a couple times I have gotten yarn, and based on the picture of it and the name of it, I was anticipating something different when it came. I had said from now on, when I'm contemplating purchasing a yarn, I am going to do a Google image search for that yarn and see the images that come up. A lot of them will probably be from Ravelry or Etsy or places where individuals are selling yarn. I'm going to check out all the other photos of that particular colorway to see if it's what I think it's going to be doing. So I will be adding that technique into my yarn browsing system. repertoire. I don't know. I'm going to be adding that into my yarn browsing as well, just to make sure that I'm really getting what I want to get. But I would love to hear any other advice or tips or tricks that you have that have helped you in your browsing procedures. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today and talking about yarn with me. It's like my favorite thing to do, so I want to thank you for making that possible. Bye.